Hello? There we go. All right, folks. Hey, we can get something to work. I want to just thank you, Representative Chris Wazinski. Thank you all for taking the time out of your busy schedules. We figured a lot of folks had a full house all day long, so maybe it's nice to get away in the evening a little bit. But we just want to welcome you. I've got a couple of senators with us, Senator Gary Dames and Senator Bill Weber. And we're just going to lay off the ground rules because we've got it's going to be live streamed today. We're going to ask you to come to the table just so we can use the microphone. We want to just hear what your thoughts are and questions and if we might be asking some questions because we're really trying to just get our hands around it. We've got a lot of ideas. There's a working group that's going around the state that Bill will talk a little bit about as well. So we're hoping if you could be kind enough. I know it pushes you out of your comfort zone a little bit, but if you could come to the table in front of us here, just so that we can all hear a little bit better using the microphones. It'll be a little bit better conversation. And then about 3 to 5 minutes, if we could kind of keep our comments to about that range. And if we go longer, we'll see what we can do, but we'd like to get you out of here by 8 o'clock. We might be able to stick around a little bit too, if that is possible, but just kind of, again, thank you for coming. And if there is some folks that are maybe, if you're like the president of the Association of Child Care in a county or kind of an economic development type folks, if you wanted to come to the table first, and then providers, and then folks after that. So if we could kind of keep it in that range, that'd be just fantastic. With that, Senator Dames.
Well, thank you, Representative Spinsky. We certainly appreciate it. I'm Senator Gary Dames. I represent Senate District 16, which includes Lyon County and Marshall. So thank you folks for turning out. This is a very serious issue that you certainly are well aware of that. If you're in the daycare, child care providers, if you're doing that, you understand a lot of the issues that we have. And so that's what we want to hear from you tonight is what issues you're having, if you're having issues with the state, if you're having issues, just what kind of issues there are and what's limiting you from expanding or what's happening that's encouraging you to get out of the daycare business, what you think it's going to take to get people into the business. So with that said, I'll turn it over to Senator Weber.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. I'm Senator Bill Weber from Laverne, Senate District 22, and I chair the Agriculture, Rural Development, and Housing Policy Committee. Obviously, most people shorten that up, and they consider me the chair of the Ag Committee. And so it's been a little bit, their eyebrows raised when the chair of the Ag Committee has been going around the state with a child care work group, having hearings in different communities. We've, besides, we were started out in St. Paul, we've been to Wilmer, we were at Lake City Monday night. Next month we'll be up at Hibbing. And the reason that we decided to do that is under the auspices of rural development, we recognize that the issue of child care has becoming a more and more of a problem for businesses, for their employees, for the young families of our communities, and also for you as providers. And so we are going around and getting the input from different people across the state. And of course, one of the things that is talked about frequently is the issue of rules and regulations from the department, how things operate, and certainly we want to hear what your concerns are. And I appreciate it when I hear not just necessarily the issue in general, but specifics, because I think it's the specifics we're going to have to take back to talk with the department and draft new legislation. There were 4 pieces of legislation that went through the legislature last year. They didn't go as far as those of us as authors would have liked them to have gone, but we did start to work around the edges of things. We got agreement of what we did accomplish with the department, and of course, that was necessary in order to get a governor's signature on it at that point in time. So now, as we prepare for the next session, that's the importance of hearing what you have to say. And so thank you for being here. We look forward to hearing from you.
All right. So folks, now it's your turn. We, as politicians, talked first, and so you guys get to talk the rest of the time, if you would. So I said there was a prize for those who sat in front, so we appreciate you guys for doing that. But there's also a prize, I really don't have a prize, but for whoever speaks first, so. Well, yeah, if they're here, you know, Brad, if you've got some stuff that you'd like to share, kind of from the overarching, and then kind of we'll work our way through the industry a little bit, and you're welcome to be put on the spot. I know you were here after I said that, so.
Well, that's all right.
Thanks.
Brad Gruhat, Marshall Area Chamber of Commerce and CVB. The one thing that we continuously hear are regulations. Regulations are, there's just too many to, for a child care provider and daycare providers to worry about. Worry is not the right word. There's just too many regulations. So that is what I'm hearing a lot, and it's hard to open up a business and to keep a business open when you can continuously have the amount of regulations. And when you're also from a big picture too, it is hard to draw in families to the city of Marshall and to this area when we have such huge problems with childcare. When Schwann's is trying to recruit, Ralco is trying to recruit, the Veras of the world are trying to recruit employees, it is hard for, you know, and then those families are looking at the daycare options here in town, and we just don't have them because of the mostly a lot of it has to do with regulations, and then the ratios and so on.
Can you be more specific on the regulations? Are there any specific regulations that you see or hear about that are stopping the growth in the child care industry?
I am not the right guy for that answer. Okay. That answer. I'm certain that some others can, though. Yeah.
So if you'll introduce yourself and just let us know where you're from.
I'm from Granite Falls. I think part of the problem with the regulations is the interpretation of the regulations. I live in a town where we have 2 counties that come together, and so one licensor might interpret the regulation differently than the other one. And so there's a lot of miscommunication as to what they really mean by that. And so that's where we're getting caught in the snafus. For example, soap. Can't have soap on your counter. But you have to have kids wash their hands, so you have to have access to the soap for the kids, but you can't have it on the counter. How do I interpret that? When one licensor interprets it one way, we talk to each other. The other licensor interprets it another way. So there's a lot of miscommunication there. So yes, there's a lot of regulations. There's a lot of safety issues that we're aware of and we need regulations for. We're just not sure how you're going to interpret that versus how you're going to interpret that, how you're going to interpret that, and how we fit into that and stay in compliance. I think that's, as our group, our EDA director just started our group called Yellow Chips, and we have several daycare providers that have been invited to that from Chippewa County and Yellow Medicine County. And when we come together, that's one of the biggest issues. What's the interpretation per person that we have to answer to, which could be completely different than what DHS means. So that's why I wanted to kind of jump on your boat. I hope that's okay.
Can you tell me how many openings you have in Granite Falls that aren't being filled? Any idea?
We're falling apart. So they just opened a center. The center has all of its infant spots filled. I believe it has all of its toddler spots filled. Daycare providers have always been full to the point where we want to be full. You might have a capacity of 10, but you're comfortable with 6. And so people have chosen not to be full. I've been full to the brim since I started years and years ago. However, now with preschool, we've lost our 3- and 4-year-olds as in-home daycare providers. So that was hit number 1. And now all these centers are opening up, which is Clarkfield, Montevideo has one, Granite Falls has one. There's a lot of them popping up. Echo got one too, all around our area. And there was a huge need, and there still is a huge need for infant and toddler. And they're very expensive to go to a center, so that's part of the reason we can stay open. But now they're opening up for the after-school kids as well, and they're undercutting us completely, so we're probably going to lose most of our after-school kids too. So you can't take a hit of 2 of your 3 groups of kids, and a lot of people are now closing or have no one. And that's in Canby, that's in Wood Lake, that's in Granite Falls, they're closing. because now we just don't have the kids that we need in order to stay open. So we wanted to work with the one that opened up in Granite Falls, but they don't communicate with us, and then we can't talk to them about things because that's a DHS regulation. So it's hard for us to sit at the same table and help each other out. I really think there's an opportunity for us to be able to work together and keep the daycares open also, but it's the town's focus right now is focused on the center, and so the daycares are dying, and they will continue to.
Two questions. First, the center is being operated by whom?
Emily Belfany, and it's either her cousin or
It's a
her
private-run center then?
It's out of the college. The college had Prairie 5 there before. Prairie 5 was bleeding money at the daycare center, and so they opted to close. It was a gift that they were giving Granite for years. You understand why they were going to close, and now it's been completely remodeled so that they can have a for-profit center at the college. But Puddle Jumpers, I believe, is separate from the college. They're just allowing them the space to be there. And the hope is that there will be enough funding and grant that money that in 3 years, you know, you change your focus, all of a sudden the grant money isn't there anymore. Will that center then close down? And now you have no in-home daycares either. So you've got to worry about that.
And so you're indicating that the school took over 4-year-olds for preschool?
3 and 4-year-olds. And
3
it's
and 4
not
years.
just 2 hours in the morning, 2 days a week. I have, McRae is taking 3-year-olds 4 days a week, all day, because they have 4-day-a-week school. So I don't even get those kids during the week. They come 1 day a week. So they have to pay their spot, because otherwise I'm going to take another full-time child. I can't say goodbye to 4 days of income to carry a spot for a kid on 1 day. And when I first started daycare, when I moved back here to Minnesota, I was born and raised in Granite and then lived in Bay Area, California for a while. I had 26 kids on my roster. And if you didn't show up by 11:01 and you showed up at 11:15, I'm out of compliance. The stress level was off its rocker for me to just worry whether or not your car didn't start, or for some reason you went to go get milk and ran late, or talk to somebody in town, which happens all the time, you know, and stuff. So it's hard to bounce schedules with so many people, and it's much easier for me to have 12 full-time kids or X amount of full-time that I can carry myself through, and then have X amount of after-school kids.
So is that pretty common then, that that people that have their children into the preschool are still paying for their spot full-time?
My families have, and I have incredible families. We've been together for 7 years with very little change, and they just accept it, and it's okay. And they understand I can't find somebody for 2 hours that morning or that day, and I have been open to, okay, you have Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you have to find somebody to do Tuesday and Thursday. It was years ago when I was in my 30s, you know, I'm pushing 46. I need a little breathing room, a little sanity, a little less crazy.
The reason I ask is that that's what we're hearing all over, and whether it's in-home, whether it's centers. In fact, centers that are completely full and have a waiting list, why don't you expand? And it is because we don't trust what the state's going to do.
Yeah.
Because if we do universal pre-K, we basically break the industry.
Yes, yeah, that's true.
Okay.
Which, it's still a good thing. We have to figure out how to work with it, you know? We have to figure out how to work with it.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. And I'm not afraid to talk. I'll be up here all day.
Well, if no one else comes up, you might be the only show in town, so. Come on up. If you just introduce yourself, that'd be great. Thanks.
You can come up and...
You just come up. Yeah, there's an extra chair. You can kind of bebop back and forth, so, yeah.
Hi, Greg Carlson. I'm representing Tracy Kids World over in Tracy. I just wanted to piggyback a little bit about what the previous speaker just mentioned, or excuse me, what you had mentioned about expanding centers. I represent the centers in the world, and you can't just expand a center in this rural community. We simply don't have the workforce to do it. We do not have the qualified staff that's required in order to have a teacher qualified person in every room based on the way the teachers are qualified through licensing. It makes it very hard for people like myself to hire these people because I can't pay them what they can pay at a very similar job elsewhere. For example, That you could go work at the school as a substitute teacher or a paraprofessional and make a lot more money than you can at a daycare, even though we have higher standards of qualification. And it comes down to the fact that we can't simply raise rates on families high enough in order to be able to compensate our workers a nominal pay. And I think as more home daycare people come up here too, you're going to find out that the home daycares are drying up because there's no incentive there. There's no dollar amount incentive for them to stay open. So that's my first thing that I wanted to touch on, and I just wanted to touch base on, to just give you an example of rules and regulations. We recently had licensing in our center here a couple months ago. They walked into one of our rooms, and we had napping kids, and of course, we draw the curtains and whatnot, and our licensor said, "Your room's too dark. You shouldn't have it. You got to have a lighter room." Those are the same curtains and blinds that have been in that facility for 11 years. Why all of a sudden is it too dark in that room? During nap time. I mean, I understand, you need to have eyes on kids. You need to be able to see kids if they're in distress or whatnot. But why all of a sudden, after 11 years of our center being open, are those curtains all of a sudden too dark? I mean, it's nothing major that we had, but just an example of the way a different licenser interprets different license standards. So pretty easy one there. I could talk about a couple of them, but I'll just leave it at that. I really think that the solution isn't just to open a center in our rural communities. It is tough to find the staff available to be open from 6 to 6. Essentially I have, in the center that we operate, we have 1 or 2 infant rooms, we have a toddler room, 2 preschool rooms, and essentially an after-school room. I have to have at least 1 qualified teacher in each of those rooms, and because I'm open 6 to 6, I have to double that because no one's going to work 12 hours a day every day. So in a town of 2,000 people, and I end up serving, I think it's 4 or 5 different counties in this region that bring their kids to our center care. It's very difficult to find and retain quality staff.
So how many students or how many children do you have at your center?
50 to 60, roughly.
Age bracket?
We market ourselves as 6 weeks to 12 years old.
I've got a question for you. So you can sit down. Now I forgot what my question was, but kind of just from a regulatory standpoint, are you seeing different licensors come in? Is it a new person that kind of came in for the first time, or was it a timing issue of what time they came in that they happened to see that? I mean, if it's been that way for 11 years, it seems like,
Yes, it was a different licensor.
It was a different licensor. Okay, so it wasn't just a different time of day, or they've never checked that room before, or any of those things.
I've been doing this for a little over a year now. That's a whole different story I can get into, but this is a different licensor that came in, and it was a different licensor that came in from our one that we've had in the past. This was probably her second visit there, and the day was a little darker. It was cloudy that day. However, right, and again, it's the same curtains and blinds we've had for 11 years. We weren't cited for it, didn't have to pay a fine for it. However, it's one of those things you ask yourself, really? That's what you're picking on me for here? Same thing we've had for 11 years.
My understanding with the center is too that, sorry, I'm Amber Shaffer, and I have an in-home child care with my husband here in Marshall. But my understanding is with the center, they also literally count every toy that you have, correct? Down to every single block?
Yes, correct. We have certain standards, certain minimum requirements that we have to meet in each room, a certain number of things on the wall at a certain height, a certain number of toys at this location, a certain number of other items that kids can play with or do. We have to have a minimum of those amounts of things. What that is specifically, I'm not going to get into because it's in the Rule 3 book that we get, that we have access to. It's I mean, personally, it's not that cumbersome, but when you do have to end up counting that stuff before they're in there, I mean, it makes a difference.
Amber, go ahead and kind of, if you've got a handout for us, that'd be great. Thank you.
I only brought two. I didn't
Okay,
realize there would be
we can share, we're sharers.
So like I said, my name is Amber Shaffer, and I have an in-home child care. I actually operate it with my husband, and we've done that for the last 6 years together. So some of these poll questions were from the in-home provider page, Facebook page, that is for the county area here. So it'd be Lincoln, Lyon, Murray, Yellow Medicine, Redwood, Cotton, and Pipestone counties. It's just a Facebook page that we have. There's 69 providers on that page. So today, I just took some time and asked some poll questions of the providers, just to, so you guys could have some data to back up. So question one, what's your biggest hurdle with childcare? Obviously, you can see that half of that of the 22 answered is licensing requirements. I didn't go into a lot of detail with the providers on what they felt, which license requirement they did or didn't disagree with. For myself, I will say that my husband and I operate a C3 license, so that allows us to have 3 infants and 1 toddler. There are a lot of requirements that come with infants. There are a lot of reasons that those requirements come, so I'm not disagreeing with those. But to tell a brand new mom that she can't let her baby sleep in a swing is very hard. So the days can get very long for providers providing care for infants.
Because they're not allowed to do what's being done at home.
Right. And we have to, and I don't disagree with the requirements for infants. They need to be safe.
Yeah.
Question 2, are your preschool openings due to losing children to full-time preschool? Of the 18 that answered, 17 of those said yes. Universal preschool, I think, is a great thing. I do think, however, the state needs to come back with a balance for providers by changing the ratios. A single provider can have 12 kids, so they can have 1 infant and 1 toddler. My husband and I do it together. We can have 3 infants and 1 toddler. I do think they need to maybe allow for even dual providers to another infant or another toddler to kind of balance out those kids that you may lose to 4-year-old preschool.
Can I touch on that?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm Holly Huffman. I am from Canby. I'm an in-home daycare provider. I'm going to touch on the ratio thing. That one is kind of a big one for me because I am actually in the process of looking for a helper, but like Amber said, I can have 12 to myself, but with a helper I can have 14. So I mean, myself, I feel like I could handle quite a bit more than 12, I guess, depending on the age. Like the infant, toddler, I get that needs to have, not too many and whatnot, but with having a son with special needs who needs lots of therapy, I can't just up and close my daycare 3 days a week, because then that puts parents into a very tough place to find somewhere for their kids to go a half a day or a full day if I had to close the whole day. So in my eyes, it'd be smart. I debated on closing my daycare just yesterday because of how much running my child with special needs requires. But now I have thought about it a little bit more, and I'm hoping that just having a helper, maybe a couple half days, will be helpful enough. But she has 2 of her own kids. So now her 2 kids are going to take up 2 spots for when she's in my care. And there's a part of me where I wish that our own children didn't really count into our licensing requirements to a certain age. I think infants, yes, because like Amber said, infants are definitely, they're harder and they take more time, and yeah, that whole part. But I think I really would like to dig on the ratio part, especially with a helper. They are required for first aid CPR training, and then SIDS in, is it AHT training? And then if they're with you for more than 30 days a year, they have to have is it 36 hours of training a year? Okay. The full thing, which is fine and I understand, but if I'm gonna have a helper do that, I would like to offer them, more time with me. But the only way to do that, to pay them, kind of like a center, to pay them able to live, we would need more kids what I mean?
Certainly. Well, I think I've heard that a few times, Holly, that, just because it's nice to have somebody else around, you can, but that, that to be able to pick up, what is it, from 12 to 14, really doesn't equate. You've got a talented person that you're going to be putting through training, that you're going to be paying, that you're going to be doing all these different things, yet from a capacity standpoint, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And, I've heard 16, I've heard, different numbers, thrown out there as far as what would be that total capacity with that helper. Do you have a number that's
16 to 17.
16 to 17.
A consensus
and then
has
maybe
come about.
even like 16 to 17, and then if you have your own children, that up to 2 don't count, like you get 2 freebies or something like that, where something like, or whatever you'd say, but as far as that capacity. Sure. Yeah, go ahead there. You did great. So
Of those preschool openings, 16 of 23 providers are struggling to fill those openings right now. 7 reported that they weren't.
That goes for centers as well.
And then, yeah, sorry, Carrie.
goes for, she said,
I didn't have information.
she goes, that's for
centers.
centers as well.
Yeah.
I'll just add that for there.
So with changing the ratios, as you would see, a lot of providers, their next infant opening is over a year out. 22 providers out of 28 don't have an infant opening for another year or longer. One provider reported that they do have an opening simply because their own child turned 11 and aged out. And then I know you, in here, would you accept more infants or toddlers in lieu of preschoolers if the ratios changed? And that's on the second page. 100% of the 23 answered that yes, they would accept more infants and toddlers if we were able to change the ratios. And I know you had touched on in your Facebook post that about child care assistance as well. 19 of 23 providers do accept child care assistance. And then question 7 just broke down some of the hourly rates that providers in the area charge. So as you can see, most providers charge $2.50 to $3 an hour when broken down into an hourly rate. And where CCAP pays about $1.16 for Lyon County and out a week. Mm-hmm.
And hasn't been changed before.
And actually, I think on one of those pamphlets I gave you, what I found on DHS dates all the way back to 2014 effective. Mm-hmm. I guess that's all I have.
Thank you. Thank you. Good job getting that data together. Yes, appreciate it.
Hi, thank you for taking the time to come out and listen to us. My name is Heather Willard with D&G Excavating. I guess that's my primary company that I work for. We, a few years ago, to give you a little bit of background, we a few years ago decided that we were facing such a shortage of employees, so we wanted to do something to capture the younger employees. So we opened up our own daycare. Within this room here, there's 3 different segments of daycare providers. You'll find center-based cares, you'll find in-home family providers, and then we are by far the minority. We're a special family daycare. We're kind of that in-between from a center to an in-home provider. We go along the same lines as an in-home family provider in terms of rules and regulations, but we kind of have that middle ground where in terms of the food program, we more so side with the daycare center. It's a very new concept. We opened up in 2015, so it's certainly been a navigating process. So I guess I can touch on a little bit of the sides of both the center-based care and an in-home provider, and there's certainly rules, regulations, and I think overwhelmingly the thing that you will hear tonight is that there is an abundance of overregulation, especially for any provider, whether you're a center-based care or an in-home provider, that is really pushing providers out. People are not wanting to get into the industry because of the overregulation and the misconceptions within those regulations. We've been fortunate, our licensors have been phenomenal to work with, and we've had great exchanges where they can give us recommendations and we can follow those recommendations. So I have absolutely no complaints about the licensors at all. But it's more so the overregulation and the stress that providers are put under because of that regulation. It's pushing people out. And to be quite frank, there's a number of providers that have just gotten out of the business entirely because there's absolutely nothing that's going to happen to them should they be caught. Well, I should rephrase it. If they're caught unlicensed and still providing care to children, they're just willing to take that gamble because it's too much time, effort, and money just to go through the regulation process and the training process. Without a doubt that people are dropping out because of that. So for me, I guess some things that I can hope for as a special family daycare. To qualify as a special family daycare, you have to be employer-based, nonprofit, or a church group. So because we're an employer-based daycare, we offer that to our employees first and foremost. I thought I should go now because Amber just touched on it. We have the capacity to add another helper, if you will, another employee, and we absolutely would do that, but it just doesn't make sense for us to add only 2 more children. We have the capacity to add 1 more full-time employee, and we feel as though we could probably handle 18 at that point because we have the room. I understand that there's certainly constraints within an in-home provider that you may not have the flexibility for the added room like we would, for example, but we feel as though we could take on at least 18 if we were to add that second full-time employee to be there as well. Another thing that we as a special family daycare, and I understand that I'm a minority so I don't want to take up too much time, but the food program, we could make adjustments to that because with a special family daycare we have to, the actual food program has to be, I'm going to say this incorrectly, it has to be for a in-home provider that has a name on it, whereas we're a business, so we don't qualify for that food program. So we have to follow under the USDA food program, basically, so we don't qualify. I wish that there was a regulation change that with special family daycares that it could be for a business as well, not just the name of the business, but we could qualify for that as well, just like in-home providers can. That would help us out. To be quite frank, it would maybe possibly switch us from being in the red to the black. So that would help us out immensely. And anyone else want to come up?
How many children do you have now?
At this point, we have 12.
And their ages?
We range anywhere from age 6 months, or I'm sorry, 6 weeks to 12 years old. We follow the same rules and regulations as all in-home family providers. We're just kind of that in-between a business and a daycare center. Okay. So I'll switch it over to somebody in the in-home or somebody else if anyone wants to go. Otherwise, I'll just keep talking.
Keep talking. When someone sits there, that might cut you down. How's that?
I can go.
Okay. We'll go.
Carrie's a phenomenal talker, too.
My name is Carrie, and I'm the director and preschool teacher at the SMSU Child Daycare Center. I thank you for being here, Senator Dames, Senator Weber, and Representative Swedinsky. So I have met with Senator Klobuchar. I've been for years on boards to try to get this moving. It's not something that just happened. I'm going to tell you it's been happening for years. Some things that just triggered it in the last 6 years were all-day kindergarten, voluntary pre-K. So when you hear all these stories about family child care and centers losing our preschoolers, we don't make money in the infants and toddlers, and that's because of the ratios. So we talked about ratios. Right now I sent 10 preschoolers to kindergarten, and I was fortunate to have a waiting list, but I only filled 2 out of those 10 out of the waiting list because they were able to start preschool somewhere else. And so right now I'm losing so much more money, and just by not filling those spots. So touching on that, we talked about regulations. I've been a director for 20 years, and the regulations are getting more and more strict. So I have been fortunate like Heather, and maybe, I don't know if it's the person or it's the personality or how it works, but I've been blessed with really great licensors where I'm really open. I don't have a problem calling. I will tell you first, I always call the intake line because it doesn't put a red flag at you. And we've talked about that. So I was in Wilmer listening to Senator Weber, and I listened to all of your forums on the Joy Initiative with the female from Mankato. So we don't ever want to be targeted, and that's probably some of the ladies and men's fear right now to come up and speak. And so when you call the intake line, you just get a quick answer sometimes, but sometimes they need to visit with other licensors to get a correct answer to you. We talked about regulations. So I meet with 10 other center directors once a month, and one center just got cited for having a booty in a crib. She can't use a fix-it ticket because it falls under health and safety. So the parents don't do a sleep sack. You can have a sleep sack between 6 weeks up until their first birthday. So the parent chose not to do a sleep sack. So just imagine a baby sleeping in a crib with nothing but a nook. But because her booty, like a sock, fell off, it was an addition to the crib and got cited for it because it was something else in the crib and it wasn't. So if we could use a fix-it ticket for health and safety, which we can't, but we could, she could have put the sock, the booty, back on and would not have been a violation. So I was quoted in the newspaper, and I apologize, I don't mean it for silly rules. And I visited with Senator Klobuchar about that. Because there are rules and regulations for a reason. And I am a perfectionist, and I strive to hit every health and safety, every regulation that was ever there. You know, I pride for 10 years, I never had a citation. I took pride in that. Until 4 years ago, when I got cited for a Kleenex box that wasn't out on the table, but if somebody would have asked me, it was in the storage room, the kid just took the last Kleenex, please let me get that for you. So when you talk about some of the regulations, those are some of the, I don't mean to say silly, some that we stress out about that I want to be done because it is so stressful right now to find staff. I advertised for a head infant teacher from August 17th to August 30th in the newspaper. Did not get a single applicant. Put it on the SMSU webpage. Put it called Minnesota West, called Ridgewater and Alexandria at the Tech. They have like 2-year program for child development. I did not get a single applicant for a full-time infant teacher. It's just so sad, and I was so stressed out. Like, I told my husband, I can't tell you at least 10 times that I'm done. I'm done because I don't have the staff to do it. I can't pay them what they deserve, let alone even what I could. Okay, we talked about consistency with licensors. There also needs to be consistency between CCAP, Minnesota Department of Health, DHS, the food program, Department of Ed. Everybody has their own regulations, but nobody's on the same page. So I hear one thing from DHS, then I need to talk to my health consultant, then I need to deal with like the Department of Ed. It's just nobody's on the same page. And everybody has to work together to make the rule, to make it work. We talked about voluntary pre-K, and I just want to make sure that everybody knows that there is mixed delivery. Voluntary pre-K can work for in-homes and centers. It has to be more known of the mixed delivery, and that is not being pushed. I don't know if anybody else agrees, but I feel like it is not. They can just go to the school, it's free, why wouldn't you? I mean, seriously. I believe parents have a choice. The dollar should not be, it should be attached to the child. I think the parent should have a choice where that money should go, and it should be attached to the child. It's the best fit for the child. Everybody parents different. What's important to me might not be important to you, and so those dollars should be spent with the child, where that parent chooses to go. I'm not really sure if I hit on everybody's stuff. Forms, they're constantly updating forms. I cannot stand this. So today I sent in a variance, and then Kim from Canoga, I don't know if Kim showed up, but just today I sent in this variance to get this teacher qualified. So she is a junior at SMSU. So I'm like, oh, thank goodness I can like pinch hit somebody. But because she has the education, she doesn't have the experience. So she needs like 4,000 hours to qualify for her experience. That's not going to work when she's going to school. So I wrote a variance, and Kim says to me tonight at church, she says, did you know you got all new forms for that? And I was like, what? So now we got new forms. And so then it's getting rejected. My email is going to get rejected tomorrow because I don't have the new updated forms, because that's, as you've heard all year, if you don't have the right form, it's rejected immediately because you need to go online to get this new form to update. I honestly don't have time to keep checking the website. I will tell you, from 8 to 5, I'm in a classroom, not online, because I'm with the children. So then I spend all night, just like all these other providers, trying to work and have a family and remain sane to work the next day. I don't know.
Keep going. You're doing good.
Yeah, right. We are competing constantly with other employers for a healthy wage for our staff, and you're going to hear that all the time. I tell Gus all the time, I'm going to go flip burgers, and the most stress I'll have is that beeper going off for fries, because I can go make way more money, get benefits. That's another thing. We don't have benefits. I don't know how you can help compensate that, but it's actually not just a Minnesota thing. It's all 50 states. It's even in Australia. So like, somehow legislation is going to have to help kick in, because the money's not coming from anywhere, anywhere else to help us. We tried to, the YMCA was going to help support, along with area businesses, to come to Marshall to help with the child care crisis, but the amount of wages, or like the rates that parents would have to pay, are double that I charge for a center. Double for them to come, triple for in-homes, because centers naturally are more than an in-home.
Just a kind of a follow-up. Has anyone done the numbers? So, obviously you're talking about making a living, doing the job, obviously, the stress level. If you were to do an analysis, if you could do two things, if you could do where the money followed the child, so that grant, that kind of moves in that direction. And then also if you could bump the numbers up to 16, 17, 18, and what that would do from the finance standpoint to say, okay, if my business model were this, and this was my revenues, these were my outflows, and kind of tweaked it. That's maybe a homework project for you guys. If you could kind of just look at your own business, and we could just send us an email or something like that, how that would look from an internal standpoint. You don't have to give specifics, but kind of, how that would put you on a financial standing, so to speak.
I have not done that projection myself. I think on a new business just starting their business plan, so Ballatin Mustard Seed would probably have the best projection. Unfortunately, new centers are closing within 3 years because they don't have the true finances. And, Children's First Finance would be able to help you with those numbers. She's a great, advocate for that. I got past variances 1 and a 12 for 3 months. I'm not. So they're sharing that you're only allowed 1 variance in a year? For 3 months in a year.
No, that's in-home, right? Now, to the individual that has but 2 counties, do you have an issue, and so maybe some of you others are close by other counties too, now that's a variable from county to county, as I understand too. Some counties grant 1 variance, some counties don't grant any variances. There's a difference that's going on out there, and that's...
And my county doesn't ask me for the variance. They ask every family in my daycare to fill out the paperwork and send it. You try to get 10 families to fill out the variance paperwork to see if I can get a variance. So if people ask me if I've ever had a variance, I go, yeah, no.
Okay.
So,
All right.
I do have some more points. Does anybody else want to get up? Okay. So I want to tap on some of the things you said. My husband works 80 to 100 hours a week. He does full-time daycare with me. He also has to work at Project Turnabout to bring in insurance, any kind of 401k. I work 60 hours a week. So between the two of us, we're working about 140 to 160 hours a week in order for me to bring home about 10 grand a year. That's tough. We have a totally different family dynamic because if you left the scissors on the table, I'm a raving lunatic because you left the scissors on the table, which put me on a compliance. You know, little things like that. Did you leave the shampoo in the shower? I'm a raving lunatic because you left the shampoo in the shower where we bathe. And there's a lot of those things. That comes up with the regulations. So these are not far-fetched regulations that the kid's sock fell off. I really guess I'm going to take the baby socks off from now on, which I've never heard of before. And that's a lot of the miscommunication and the misinterpretation of those regulations that we really need to come to the bottom of. And another thing that my group is dealing with, I have a wonderful licensor, and I'm not afraid to speak. I'm not chicken to ask any questions. And if you're my licensor, I will say, hey, somebody came up with this. We're wondering about this. My licensor will answer my question. My licensor will talk about it. And they all funnel these questions through me because they're deathly afraid of their licensor, the person who's supposed to be helping them. And we've had many instances where the person has called you, who's not my licensor, and said, I don't know about this question. I don't know what's going to happen. Well, I'm writing you up for that. And now you've got, I bet, raise your hand if you are a type A personality who wants to get every regulation right and never get written up. Every single one of us in our group, too, in Yellow Chips, we want to do it 100% correctly. I don't want to post, and now we don't have to post, correct? Those things on our wall. We had a lady in Clarkfield who was written up for maltreatment of a child because she let the kids wait for the school bus and the school bus didn't show. Didn't know that school was canceled because they tell the parents, but they didn't tell the daycare. So the kids walked back, somebody saw it, reported her, $1,000 fine, and it doesn't say she let the kids wait for the school bus that didn't show. It says that she maltreated a child. There's a huge discrepancy there. So yeah, I'm afraid to ask you the question, but I have a great relationship with you. Funnel that through me and I'll ask my licensor for you. But how am I supposed to get better at my job if I can't even ask the question? Never heard about a booty sock before. How can I not ask you about that?
Question. As it relates, you know what, I lost there in the transition. Sorry. Go ahead. Continue on.
I have go all day. We talked about the contract, and I did take a little heat on the public site. My contract's 69 pages long. Just got approved by my licensor. I worked really hard on that bugger, and my families know about DHS, and we deal with it. Once a year, we fill that thing out, so I notify you every year. Just got to stack that thick of brand new forms. I am now out of compliance until I get those new forms incorporated, and they fill out 69 new pages for them to be in compliance. Now you need daycare for a day because your daycare's closed. You need to fill out my 69 pages just to drop your child off at my daycare. Yeah, there has to be agreements there. That's an issue. My biggest thing is protection for us. Where's our protection? And I hate to be specific, but I have been in situations where mom and dad were married, mom and dad are no longer married. Mom decided to date a class 3 sex offender. What am I going to do? Do I tick you off and say, I'm sorry, you no longer have daycare at my house, and you go tell your boyfriend, I just lost my daycare at your house, and now I'm on his radar? Do I ride the storm? Is it a he said, she said situation because that child just got in trouble? There's no protection for me. There has to be some protection for us. You're hitting us right and left. We're standing back up again. We are riding the storm, and then something that I didn't do can take me down. I talked to police officers in town. I talked to the deputy sheriff. I talked to the sheriff in town. Different stories across the board there, too. Oh, you'll be fine. Don't worry about him. Don't get on his bad side. Hey, guess what? If he shows up at my house and I call 911, are you going to be there for me? Yeah, we'll see. But where's my protection? Again, you're my licensor. Boy, we've got a great relationship. I told you everything. You're well in the know. You're even a county reporter. We're okay. But what about the girl sitting next to me who has a different licensor? I can communicate with you, but this one can't communicate with her licensor. There's got to be more protection. There's got to be more information. There's got to be more of a way for us to educate ourselves on all of those regulations that come up.
You mentioned about the fact that you don't have to post in a conspicuous place.
That's new. I want to verify that.
Now, is it that used to be like for 2 years you had to have it up
2 years.
there? But now is it my understanding that they went ahead and put it on the website for 4?
It's always been on the website, yeah. It's on the website. So if you were to go look for daycare, you would go look and you would see this person was written up for maltreatment of a child. This person was written up for, and there's big names to things like your booty sock fell off, child endangerment, big scary stuff. And as a parent, you think, oh my God, they hit a child. Oh my God, they, not her booty sock fell off in her crib. Oh, her grass was pokey. Oh, she had a stick in the backyard. Oh, blah, blah, blah. There's simple things that we're
My 3
lost
grandchildren were at our house over Labor Day weekend. I am ages 2 to 5. I'm sure none of my toilet plungers were in the right spot. So anyway.
I hope there was a lot of people for that. Was there a lot of people for that? I really wanted to go. That would have been something to witness. Okay.
Other folks want to come testify?
I'm just going to say, Minnesota is an innovative state. Be innovative. Let's work together and lead the country in the right direction to go. We have incredible leadership in this state. There's a lot of states really struggling with that. And I don't think the leadership is that afraid to be the first and set the best example. Minnesota has some of the best examples for human beings in this country. Let's be innovative. Let's work together and just show them how great it can be. That was my statement.
My name's Tom Bowen. I'm the director of the YMCA here, and coming at it a little bit differently. And I've talked to a couple of you about our situation a little bit. But so the Y is a large organization, an old organization, the largest provider of childcare in the nation. And so this is done at Y's 10,000 locations around the world. But we haven't done it in Marshall, and there's a reason for that. Mostly what we've heard tonight from these providers. I've been here 6 years as a director. Each and every year we've been approached by the business community and what could we do as a YMCA. We would like to see that happen. Last year it took its deepest dive. We hired a consultant, looked at what that would look like in Marshall. We had lots of meetings with our friends in homes and centers, and it came back with, for the Y to do it, the Y motto would be to, the ratio of kids would be 126 kids would be the minimum we would do to do that. We would offer benefits, full benefits to all the staff, from teachers, licensed teachers to aides to everybody. And that's just kind of where the Y would stand on things. But that raises that cost so high that, like Carrie said, we would be astronomically higher than the going rate in Marshall. There would be about a $3.7 million capital investment to build the center, number one, and then charging the rates for 126 kids that are the going rates in Marshall right now, we would lose $150,000 a year. It just makes it impossible to do. If we raise that, $50 more a week, it would be better. We had some break-even numbers on year 3 if we charged $100 a week per child more. And that just kind of puts that out of the ballpark. And then besides, even if we did it, the big worries are staff. 126 child center would take a lot of staff. We have, as a Y, we have a hard time filling lifeguards and staff positions we have now. There's just, and licensing and all the things that have been covered tonight, but more on the economic side. And then we want to be a good partner. We definitely would not want to build a center and put our friends in the community out of business. And the only way we could look at that at all would be that potentially a center for kids could employ some of the folks in this room, and all of a sudden they have benefits, they have a higher salary because of that structure. But our goal would not to be to hurt other centers, and we could build something really nice, and we'd be in the same boat in the community. And probably the other big one is the numbers. Again, that pre-K, where the dollars are, they're just, the kids aren't there, like Carrie said. And that would, for my board of directors looking at investing in that, that's a huge unknown. Would there be kids to do it? So, thank you.
Hi, my name is Ben Walker. I teach at SMSU, so my students are 18 and older, so not quite the clientele that we're hearing from people tonight. But I do have 3 of my children at Canoga Park Daycare here in Marshall, and I think I see Kim and Ashley back there somewhere. Yeah. And I know we're trying to let other people go first, but no one was in the chair, so I figured I'd take my chance. And I just want to say, first of all, thank you very much for having this, because we need to have these discussions in the community. So thank you so much for doing this. So far we've heard from people who run these amazing centers that watch our kids and do this daycare work. And from a parent standpoint, I just want to turn around and say to all of you, thank you so much. Oh my goodness, thank you so much. And I know it's a ton of work and you don't get thanked enough. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I don't know many of you here, but I do know, like I said, I do know Kim and Ashley, and they do amazing work with my kids. My kids have special needs, they're autistic, and from day one, a couple years ago, Kim welcomed my kids with open arms, said, you'll always have a spot in our place. And I know it's been really tough. I know it has. And I know they don't let on all of that because they don't want to stress us out. But we know. But every day, it's so nice to be able to drop them off and know that they're in good hands. So I don't have anything else other to add than that, but I just want to say thank you so much. It really is appreciated. Parents do it. Sometimes we don't do a good job of telling you that, but we really, really, really do appreciate it. So thank you so much. We need to find solutions to make their job easier because, oh my goodness, it sounds so stressful. So
I'm Joy. I do family child care, have for 30 plus years. When I started out, there was one tier for the food program. Now there's two. It's really hard. Can you serve a child a snack for 20 cents? That's really hard to do when you have your neighbors that are, doing it for 73 cents. And that's just a snack. Breakfast is 48 cents for tier 2, $1.31 for tier 1. For tier 2, lunch supper is $1.48, $2.46 for tier 1, 20 cents snack for tier 2, 73 cents for tier 1. I'm unsure of why that just can't be across the board. That makes a big difference in, if you can stay in business or not. Food is expensive.
And what's the difference between tier 1, tier 2? I mean, in terms of what's the difference of classification, how does that get determined?
It goes by if your school district qualifies for low income.
Okay.
Yeah, reduced lunch, low income. And I'm from Minnesota. Our school district doesn't push it. I wish they would. I don't know how to get them to do that. A lot of people won't fill out the forms because, we don't qualify. They may, they just they don't know. A lot of people, it's a stigma attached to it. They don't wanna, have free and reduced lunches. I did, I'm not gonna lie. I have 6 kids. That was a huge help. But it's really hard when you have to meet all these regulations for the food program. Make sure you're serving the kids all the right components to do that for 20 cents or 73 cents or $1.48. That's one thing that I wish would change.
Come on up.
Good cost test. Joy, that's all you have?
You're being prompted, Joy, I think.
After 30 years.
It's changed so much. I'm a mentor. I have a really hard time telling people to go into childcare because the rules change so much. Right now I'm mentoring actually one of Carrie's employees. She wants to do daycare so bad. She grew up in my daycare. I just have a really hard, I'm doing it with her. She's going to be great. Whether she can make it or not, that's going to be the key. I myself have had phone calls for infants every day for weeks. I have a C3 license right now. My daughter works with me because she's going to college. She's doing it online. So I can take that extra infant. Could I handle more? Yeah, I think that I've been doing this long enough that I could handle more kids. I get the rules. I understand it's all about safety, and that's really what it's become. It's become a safety issue. everything, he asks my kids, they do. They think I'm crazy because everything is a safety issue. You have to make sure everything is put away. You can't leave anything out. I love my licensor. We get along great. I can call her, ask her questions. She gets back to me. I've never felt threatened, and we've had many licensors through my 31 years of doing daycare. But they're really good, and their hands are tied. They're getting their rules from DHS, and I know that they take the blow from all the providers, but it's really, they're just enforcing the rules, which is really hard for some providers to understand. It's changed a lot. It's a really hard industry. I love my job, obviously, or I wouldn't be doing it this long. I have 16 kids on my roster. Obviously not all at once, but that's how many kids are on my roster. Yeah, we alternate back and forth.
Thank you. Thank you for 30 years.
I'm not the only one.
One of the common topics that we hear about in our hearings has been the training and the continuing education and what have you. How is it for this area in terms of getting the necessary training hours? For example, CPR, I think there's only one or two, no, excuse me, infant seats. There's only one or two actual trainers across the entire state of Minnesota. For car restraints. And, you know, and I think about that and I look, we have all these first parent classes in all of these hospitals, and and they all get taught how to put their child into the car seat. It seems to me that there's probably plenty of other opportunities that are out there, but they don't use them. And I know we had people over in Lake City from Bemidji Monday night. And it was just a bit of a trek. And they had been licensed to actually do CPR training, but now because they don't have all the other initials behind their name, they can no longer provide it. And so these people from up there have to travel hours and hours and hours because there's nobody else that they're going to let give them the training. So how big a problem is that for Marshall, Granite Falls, Canby, all the areas around? Is it an issue here too?
Or your master's. So what I'm saying is develop, which everybody's on to go through training. And before I could be a trainer, just on my experience and my education, and speak many times on modeling and try this. It might not work this time, but try this on mental health, behaviors, challenges. We all learn from each other. But because Develop put these standards on the trainers, we're so limited now on training because there's not that many trainers that can do it because they don't have their 4-year degree or their master's to do that, or is willing to travel to Marshall, Minnesota or the surrounding areas for us to get that training. That's the key. Yeah. The traveling. Yeah. Yeah.
On a Saturday, because it's not happening during the week.
Right, because we're all working.
Yeah, yeah, from the...
No, no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there is some training happening in a week on a Saturday here in Marshall. Is that, I don't know what exactly that training is, but I thought I saw something was going on.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times it's through the Y. And, you know, so my role here is executive director of this Y, but I'm also the chairperson of the Minnesota State Alliance of YMCAs. We actually have a meeting in the Twin Cities tomorrow. And so I represent the 18 Ys in the state of Minnesota, and the Twin Cities is a huge Y, third largest Y in the world right now. And so that's something legislatively that the Y would be happy to get involved in. We have facilities all around the state. We do CPR, first aid already. We could, if it was easy enough and you didn't have to have people with master's degrees, we could do that as a YMCA. It was something we'd be happy to undertake. we could have in-house people. That's what we do for aquatics, training our lifeguards, our swim instructors. We do that already. But the rules right now would make that impossible besides CPR, first aid. But I know as a state alliance, we would be happy to take that on, and it would be a win-win for everybody. Yeah, if they would allow our staff to do the car seat trainings and those kinds of things, and we've got the facilities, we've got the people in different areas. It just needs to be aligned so it's possible to do it.
You know, Tom touched base on the fact that, you know, the Y would be able to take some of this training on. However, that doesn't stop this, and again, coming from a center's world, I still have to pay my staff to go to these trainings, whether it's after hours, whether it's there. You know, I still have to pay that with margins that are already as thin as they can be. How can we afford to pay these people to go to this extra trainings? And not only that, but I mean, from our standpoint, if I have a full-time employee, they are, regardless of whether they're a teacher, an experienced aide, an aide, whatever it may be, they're required to have 2% of their hours worked be in training. So an additional, above and beyond their job, has to be in training. That equates roughly to, for a full-time person, roughly 40 hours of training a year. So I have to pay someone an additional 40 hours that I'm not bringing in any revenue for. And some training is great. I think that it's definitely needed. However, the way I think about it a little bit too is why do I have, in each of my rooms I have a lead teacher, and that teacher I think should have that training. But why are my aides expected to have the exact same training in as many hours as a lead teacher? Sure, I want that. I want that knowledge, that common-based knowledge, the safety knowledge there. But a lot of times we're taking, an aide might help in the directive of a teacher, where those hours that are required for everyone in a center-based setting, that just exceeds so many hours. And when it comes down to dollars, it's very hard to do so. You know, Carrie mentioned they took Develop away from, for some people, there are some online tools that people in our settings can use, but it's not enough to quantify the number of hours needed. So I have to either pay for someone to go take those hours elsewhere. I have to host something in my center where we're still paying staff to be there on time. It just makes, and don't get me wrong, we're a nonprofit. We're not supposed to, we're supposed to just exist. However, it makes it very hard to do so when we're still paying extra staff hours to go do these trainings. Makes it very hard to have people want to work when, gosh, I got to take 3 Saturdays to go do these trainings. I mean, nobody, counting that extra time, it makes it even harder to maintain that staff. So, I mean, something different there, some other solution would be very helpful, or even some help paying for the trainings, or help loosening some of the requirements on some of the people that I wouldn't consider, let me rephrase that, loosening some of the training restrictions on some staff members that maybe aren't in a lead position.
You're allowing, it's bringing down that level of what you need for the instructor, because there's great lay people out there, people in this room that could do car seat training, those kinds of trainings. And so that's how it works for aquatics and, and the Y. We can't afford to send people to Twin Cities. We send one, they become a lifeguard trainer, they come back, they do everything inside this building for us. And if it could be done something like that, where you could have one of the people in this room be the trainer, it changes the game versus having 2 in the state.
Hi. I know it's getting close to the ending time, so I kind of want to throw it back on you guys for a second. I've been to a lot of these meetings over a few years where we kind of talk about things and we throw things out at the representatives and the senators that come out to us. Where are you at? Do you have any great ideas? Is there anything bouncing around? Healthcare for daycare providers, standard for all the parents who have kids who have daycare, something to help keep us open when the numbers are low? What have you got? What are you working on? Where are you going? Or are you still just gathering information?
Sure. We this last session, they had, for the first time in the House of Representatives, a committee straight for a subcommittee. Mary Franzen is that chairperson in the House side. I think Bill kind of handles that in the Senate. A committee just dedicated to child care issues. I have one bill that I worked on just towards the end of session that was kind of in the low range. One of the issues that we've been hearing from is just some of that relational stuff for unlicensed folks. And that is House File 4199. And that bill just simply changed the tweak. This is something that happened to us personally, where we had a friend that was watching my sister's kid, and they wanted to maybe hang out, and they got turned in. So she couldn't watch our kids for a day, a week, or whatever like that. And so working with that, you know, from an unregulated standpoint, you know, I think from a bill standpoint that I really see moving forward that needs to probably get passed is definitely expand those numbers. You know, I think from a finance, and I think that the homework that I did give you guys it'd be very interesting to see how that dynamic changes the finances internally from your business if those numbers did change. So if we change them we've heard three numbers. I heard, you know, moved from 14 to 16. I heard 17, and I heard an 18 in here as well. You know, what would that do? And then also from a child standpoint of, you know, I heard more and more often that, like from an infant standpoint, that, you know, we can handle more of an infant, because any business needs to go where demand is, right? But if the regulation doesn't allow you to go where the business is, because, you know, if the school's getting involved and parents are making a choice for their preschool age children, the need and the draw is in a different place. It's not there anymore. So how do we allow these businesses to actually fill the need?
Yes, very true.
Right? I mean, at the end of the day, if we're not going to allow you as a business owner to actually fill the need that's demanded of you, you know, I think that's the stage we have to. But, you know, at the end of the day, you know, the books and the reason why that contract is 69 pages is because a lawyer helped make it that way. Right? You know, because at some point someone was injured. At some point maybe one or two children choked on their booty. Right? I mean, that's, you know, from a legislative standpoint, from a political standpoint, oftentimes it's that tragedy that happened in a very small, instant, tear-jerking case, and it's hard to lose somebody or have an injury or have those things, but that's how that stuff happens. And it's not necessarily a common thing, but when it does happen, it's absolutely tragic. And yeah.
To get to the specifics of your question right now, are there proposals out there as it relates to some of the issues that you brought up? And the honest answer is no. The reality of it is that you know, if committees can come forward with some recommendations of something, you know, right now, next year will be a budget year. We'll have to go through the budget process. One of the most difficult areas in our state budget is HHS. The growth that has been experienced there due to a variety of reasons has just, you know, become extreme. And so every item that you talked about has to go into that budget. And so it will be a challenge, you know, as we go forward from here. But you know, the question has to become, how are we going to address the issue? You know, I think we need to have an honest discussion with all the parties involved. You know, I think school districts have to be very careful about what they're doing, because, you know, the preschool situation basically screws up the entire system. And I'm not saying that it's not a good thing, but it screws up the system. We got to be honest about it. And so how do we make that all work? And so there's going to have to be, in the whole child care issue, the Department of Ed really hasn't entered into this equation, but they're going to have to be brought to the table on this whole issue. Because quite frankly, I would guess that if the schools took over the entire system, they wouldn't have to operate with the same rules you're doing, you know, and they already don't. And so it's it is some of my senators came up to me and said, what in the blank did you get us into? As we've been going around listening to this, and at the same time we recognize the time for talking is, we need to get the data, but we do need to step forward and start figuring out some solutions. And it isn't all going to happen at once, because there's just too many things out there. And quite frankly, there needs to be a change in perspective as far as the leadership of the department. Right now, your in-home daycare licenses, what's the first thing people see on them? If there's a problem, call, to report somebody. I mean, the gentleman that turned around and thanked you, I mean, it's long overdue. But right now, I think you have a feeling that the state, quite frankly, isn't there to help you, but it's there to get you. And
I have to say, me personally, no. I talked to Reggie, I talked to her staff, I talked to Jay, Janicek, because again, I'm not afraid to talk to people.
But I want to say you're part of the minority in that regard.
Yeah, because I took the step. I think a lot of people are afraid. I went to the meeting where they were there, and Reggie said, hi, I'm the lady on your licensor, and put herself out there. And I think that she's willing to have the conversations. I also know that I asked Mr. Janicek so many questions that he got really sick and tired of being a little angry at me. So now I'm a little afraid. But I think they're caught in the conundrum too. I think they know licensors are interpreting things the way that licensors interpret them, and they didn't think they were supposed to be interpreted that way, like a booty sock or something. And they're tired of hearing us say, oh my God, I just got written up because I let the kid wash his hands with soap. I wasn't supposed to use soap. There's a lot of that going on, and they're tired too. And they want to have a better communication with us as well. Our route is just through the licensor. So I think the 3 levels all have to get on the right communication path so we can all discuss things with each other without being reprimanded and written up for maltreatment of a child for letting him wash his hands.
My comment to Reggie has been, I should not have to legislate common sense.
And she does, though. Because of the problems that she's had.
But she's the person that has been dealing with me. And so, I
just want to put it out there that I've been dealing very well with DHS. Just have that on record.
And that's fine. But my comment to them at all, and it's been to
you get me, right?
The assistant commissioner as well, is we should not have to legislate common sense. Now, if we have to, we will.
Remember, I lived in California for several years.
But
I get that too.
Well, I don't want 201 politicians to develop that.
Yeah.
I understand that. But at the same time, if I have to shake a few trees up there, then I have to shake a few trees up there. And so as does Senator Dames and Representative Swazinski. But so it is something that government bureaucracy has to be willing to meet us part way. And that ultimately comes from the top. And and that's why the bills that did get passed, we worked closely with them to get things to a point where we'd get a signature so that something got done. Anyway, I appreciate all of you being here tonight, and I'll certainly add the new comments to the ones that I've had. And you came to the table, so you must have had something you...
I just had one more thing to add with the training to kind of backtrack. So over the summer, we hired 3 people. DHS
who are you?
Oh God, my name is Ashley.
Okay.
I'm from town.
And you're with?
A center.
A center, okay.
Yep. So we hired 3 people to help cover people's days off because people like to leave in the summer. DHS requires that within 90 days of training, if they are teacher qualified, that they have their first aid CPR, they have to have their SIDS, their abusive head trauma, blah, blah, blah. We also have a van to transport, so they need more training. So we go through, we train everybody as quick as we can to make our headaches less. They leave after 4 or 5 months because they come in and they realize, oh, I don't want to deal with 20 preschoolers that are running around like chickens with their heads chopped off in the summer, or they don't want to do it, or whatever the reason is. But we just spent anywhere from $100 to $200 on each staff person to get them trained within those 90 days to find out that it's not really what they want. So one thing that I guess we would ask is, could we have a little bit more time to train them? Because if you're not exactly on 90 days, and it's 90 days, not 90 business days, so if it happens to be over Christmas, you're SOL if you don't get it done right away. Or if it's not offered in town, like cars. The director and the owner, one is cars trained, one is not. She was gone on vacation. I was in a classroom. He could not drive the vehicle because he did not have his cars training. So the vehicle sat there. Nobody could go on field trips, nothing. It sat there for a week because we had nobody qualified to train. We had nobody that could do it. And then just as a cost, we sit and we do it within the 90 days to be good, and we have to start over. And I don't know, you, Carrie, a month or two more would maybe be nice.
Yeah, I just lost a girl after a week after I paid to get her fingerprinted, background study check, to get her CPR first aid, all this stinking money, and I was just so mad. And then she just realized that she can't go to school and work at the same time. And I bless her, thank you for telling me right away. But on the budget side, that was a huge dent. And now I need to find someone again within 2 weeks and train them all over again.
And I think, and to that end, I know one of the things I've heard is that some of you 20, 30-year providers decide to hang it up. You can't go to the center and actually, you have to start at basically the bottom, work your way up, and that's not right either. So, but anyway, again, thank you for being here, and I appreciate it, and I'll turn it back to Senator Dames.
Well, again, as Bill said earlier, I think he summarized pretty good on the question of where we're at legislatively and what we're going to do. From what I'm hearing tonight and at the other listening sessions I've been at, is we hear about ratios. That comes up every meeting. We hear about rules and regulations and the enforcement of them. That comes up every meeting. And we also, the interpretation of the rules and regulations, when it comes to rules and regulations, that's where we're probably hearing the biggest concern is the difference in the interpretation from one community to another on the rules and regulations. The reason we're having these listening sessions is to gather information like we did tonight, and thank you folks for sharing your knowledge on the issue, for sharing your experiences, and for sharing what's happening within your daycares. We truly do appreciate that. And we'll take all that information that we're having at these listening sessions, kind of see what percolates to the top, and then look at some legislation according to that. But again, thank you folks very much for coming out. We truly do appreciate it. And thank you for what you do. Every community has a shortage of folks willing to do daycare. So that you that are doing it, whether it's in a center, individually, or whatever, thank you very much for that. We do appreciate it. And hopefully we can come up with some solutions to some of these issues and help make this job easier and help so that we can get more people doing it. Because I don't know what the numbers of spaces that are needed are in Lyon County, but I know that in many counties they're quite high, and I'm sure Lyon is no different. So we need to look at solutions to solve that. With that, I'll turn it back to Chris.
Thank you, Senators, for coming today, and thank you all for coming today as well. We did send a sign-up sheet if you like, and you can use that we'll communicate with you guys at some point in the future, too, as legislation keeps moving along. And just a special shout out to Holly. It's a conversation that we had that kind of led to putting this together. So we appreciate that, and so we appreciate all that you do, and don't hesitate. We'll probably be around here a little bit too if you want to pull us aside and chat, but thanks again for coming. Have a good night.